welcome everybody to this. This is our fourth night of our Nature and Mental Health Week. We have had a introduction to the invertebrates of Regent's Park. We've been talking about gardening and mental health. Last night we weren't on the nature theme, but we were with a couple of psychiatrists and the GP and our local patient participation group. But yeah, tonight we have with us Ratnadeva, who is a Buddhist friend of mine. He's also a Druid, and as you will discover, he's spent a lot of time living. Oh, he is Dharma. There he is, Dharma Druid. It's written on his chest. So yeah, he spent a lot of time living in nature, and has some interesting stories to tell. So just to say, we will at the end of his talk, he has invited us to go into some small breakout rooms with just 3 of us in each. So we will do that for just a little time, just to talk with each other about our experience of nature and the healing power of, well, I was going to say she. Yes, there's a question, interesting question for me as to whether nature is feminine. I did ask Ratnadeva what his sense was, and he said, sometimes. There you go. All right. Well, we've got some canned bird song running here. So
amazing how quickly they go into the background. Oh, wow.
Okay, Ratnadeva.
Thank you.
Up to you.
Thank you, Tim, or Velasamani, as I know you, and warm welcome to all. It's a real privilege to be here. Thank you, Tim, for inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege. Yeah, so my name's Ratnadeva, and I'm going to be talking about the healing power of nature, and I'm going to be talking from my background of exploring 2 spiritual traditions, Druidry and Buddhism. And immersion in nature in that context of my explorations. And of course, just a small correction to what Tim said at the beginning. What I think I'll do is talk for about 25 minutes or 20, thereabouts, and then take a break then, just to give you a break from my voice, and maybe we'll do the breakout, 10-minute breakout for you to discuss your own experience of the healing power of nature at that point, and then I'll talk more. So the first section kind of neatly, hopefully, will fit an introduction and a description of the ailment. If we want to be healed, well, presumably we need to define what the ailment is, and then the second half will be very much more about the healing, the cure. So ailment, cure. So I think it would be remiss of me not to make reference to the connection that Druidry has with Primrose Hill, with, if I'm pronouncing his name right, Yolo Morganwg, the Druid revivalist, who back in 1792, I think it was, there's a plaque to his name. He went to Primrose Hill and established a gorset of, at least inaugurated or proclaimed a gorset of bards, following, according to himself, of course, following ancient rites of the Druids. And of course, there's an ongoing connection there with the Druids. The Druids arrive, I believe, on the pagan festivals, maybe the solstices and the equinoxes, and do conduct ritual at Primrose Hill. I haven't got there yet myself. I'm looking forward to one fine day. My own experience with Druidry started 18 years ago with the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. There are quite a few different Druid orders. And that was my introduction to modern Druidry, neo-Druidry, if you like. And, well, Druidry is hard to pin down. There are no foundational figures like, Christ or the Buddha or Muhammad. There's no foundational literature, seminal texts like the Bible or the Quran or the Pali Canon in the case of Buddhism. So to define it, it's not that easy. If you, my sense is, if you get 10 Druids in a room, each one of them will give you a different definition. It'll be a kind of a working definition of what Druidry is. But I have identified specific outlooks, if you like, that underpin Druidry. And the key outlook, I would say, is reverence for nature. So a sense that we all belong to this web of life. Let's just illustrate a little with some slides. So yes, I just present this as an image of the web of life that Druidry tends to. It's a good metaphor for the view of nature that Druidry adopts, which is that humanity is just one element within this web of life. Druidry basically has an ecological worldview. Ecology being the study of relationships between living organisms and their physical environment. So relationships, connection is really what Druidry is concerned with. And this image is an image of interconnectedness. So I would say that interconnectedness is a central theme within Druidry, a central part of its worldview. It's the basis of its morality, that we're all interconnected and our actions have consequences because of that. So if I act or think or dream, that has consequences for the people with whom I'm connected. And also because of that interconnection, my actions and thoughts can make a difference. And that, of course, is a bit scary, that every action, every thought can make a difference, but it's also empowering. And it behoves us as agents, moral agents, to take responsibility for our actions. So that's kind of a quick description of Druid ethics on the basis of this image of interconnection. It is key to the Druid worldview, I would say. How does this reverence for nature and the interconnectedness of nature manifest in practice? Well, immersion in nature is the practical outcome of this reverence. So my experience of Druidry would be going at the festivals, like this image is a Druid camp at Immersion Festival, 1st of February, and as you can see, like it can be quite severe. You experience the elements, whatever the weather throws at you, you experience it. Since 2003, have been going to Druid camps. They've been a bit thin on the ground lately, as you can imagine, and what has happened over the years is we celebrate the festivals which mark the passage of the seasons. This is obviously Beltane, 1st of May. We celebrate them with ritual, full of symbol and myth. This is 1st of August is kind of the pagan equivalent of the harvest festival. This is Lunasa. And finally, the fourth festival at which we would gather would be Samhain. That's the 31st of October. And generally, a key element of our gatherings would be the communal dimension, where we come together to conduct these rituals. I would say, if you're looking at a definition of ritual, of Druidry, key elements there are, as I've mentioned, reverence for nature, but also community and ritual. There are other key elements of the definition. So I'm going to take a step back and say, well, what actually drew me to Druidry was Buddhism. That's where I first knocked at the door of Buddhism. And I was meditating for a few years. And out of that process of meditation, you never know what you're going to get really out of the process of meditation. But what happened for me was I discovered a need, a desire to celebrate nature, connect with nature through celebration, through marking of the seasonal festivals. So yeah, that is a sense of that need dawning that attracted me to Druidry. And I was fortunate after a few years of, if you like, practicing, exploring Druidry and Buddhism in tandem, I got an opportunity to bring the two together. When in 2009, I gave up the day job. I was working as an environmental scientist with the Geological Survey. And I went to join a Buddhist charity called Buddhafield. And Buddhafield runs camping retreats in Devon, mostly in Devon, and maybe another illustrating slide or two would fill out the picture. So once again, pretty much immersed in nature from late March to late October, actually. So we would set up camp in various fields in Devon, and again live in that period under canvas, under the sky, experiencing the natural cycles. Really being present to the seasonal shifts of climate and growth and vegetation and greenness and flowers, with plenty of opportunities for ritual, again, similar to Druidry, marking symbolically, mythically, the changes. So quite an elemental life, very much similar to Druidry, a strong emphasis on communal engagement, mutual supportiveness, a kind of a visceral immediacy, sleeping close to the earth, feeling the rain, the sun, the wind, whatever the elements, whatever the weather threw at you, and quite primal in a sense, with campfires, feeling the warmth of the fire, the warmth of community. Yeah, and of course, feeling the proximity of non-human life, like meditating each morning to the dawn chorus, or hearing the hooting owls as you went to sleep. So very much a sense of immersion in nature. And I worked with Buddhafield for 8 years. So that's the context of my immersion in nature, at least part of. And that's the background for my exploration of these two spiritual traditions, Druidry and Buddhism, and an exploration of their complementarity as I have experienced it, very much in the context, in a natural setting. And this has led me to an understanding of our need for healing. And at the same time, it has thrown, at least my exploration of these two traditions and my experience of nature has thrown some light on the role that nature can play in that healing. So let me move on to a description of, as I see it, the fundamental malaise, the disease, what is it? And I'm coming now, at least initially, predominantly from a Buddhist perspective, describing the fundamental malaise, this predicament that we all face. And fundamentally, it's a deluded self-image or sense of self, an image of the sense of, or a sense of self that is fixed, separate and independent. Now, Buddhism would say that this is a misinterpretation of our experience. And in a way, it's an inevitable development from a basic function that we have, a basic capacity that has been absolutely fundamental to our evolutionary development, which is being able to conceptualize. That capacity has been key to our our development as a species. The ability to create abstract labels and evaluate environmental threats on the basis of these labels. So we were talking about lions earlier, you know, lion, tree, me, you know, they have supported the existence, the continuation of our species. This ability, this capacity to conceptualize. But there's a problem here with, there's an issue. Part of this capacity to conceptualize means that we put a word on an object, and we see it as external to ourselves, and obviously that means there must be an inner, there must be a self, must be a sense of self comes out of that. If there's something that's known, there's a knower. If there's something that's desired, there's a desirer. So what comes out of conceptualization is this dualistic world, and the most fundamental duality is this distinction of self and other. Now these are really useful. They're all mental artifacts. They're what our minds use to help us to interpret our sense data, and they provide us with a coherent picture explanation of the environment. So highly functional and important. There's a problem though. We assume that these conceptual distinctions are real. They represent something absolutely real. And this is what Buddhism would say is a deluded sense of separation. It's not just Buddhists who think along these lines. Let me give you a quote from Einstein. A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feeling as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. So I'm talking now about this delusion of a separate sense of self. So what would Buddhism say is the reality? If a separate sense of self is incorrect, if that's a false sense of self, well, Buddhism would say there is no separate, fixed, independent self. We are not things. I am a process, constantly changing, connected to and dependent on other processes that surround me. So an analogy to describe this would be eddies in a stream. So eddies in a stream, if you can imagine them, they're distinct, but they're not separate from the stream. If you have no stream, you have no eddies. If you have no water, you have no eddies. And also they're constantly changing. The water in any given eddy is constantly changing. So in constant flux. So this is a very good analogy for how Buddhism sees what we are and what all the objects around us are. They're all processes, interdependent and in flux. So this deluded sense of self as fixed and separate, independent, takes the form of a fixed, narrow identity. This is who I am, my nationality, I'm Irish, I'm a Druid, I'm a Buddhist. Character traits, whatever they are, you might get to know a few. My possessions maybe partly identify me, or I identify with them. Maybe my body, we all have various facets that we identify with. And this fixed, narrow identity gives rise to an assessment of our experience in terms of narrow self-interest. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the problematic aspect of this sense of self. We assess our experience in terms of narrow self-interest. This is kind of our default response. Now you could say this is also partly evolutionarily necessary, because self-interest in a competitive situation way back when, in conditions of extreme shortage of resources, was that it motivated us to get our mate and get that food. So the default responses to our experience are craving, what we don't have, attachment to that which we already have, but subsequently fear of losing that, and aversion towards anything that frustrates our desires, getting what we want, or aversion towards that which threatens what we already have. Now, this, Buddhism would say, is really the essence of the disease, the cause of our eternal restlessness, if you like. This is described in Buddhist doctrine as the second noble truth, that craving and aversion, craving stroke aversion, are the cause of suffering. And the fixed, narrow identity out of which they come is the fundamental ignorance. Now, this is a Buddhist description of our unenlightened human predicament. And Druidry wouldn't say necessarily advocate that same line of thinking, that analysis, but it certainly would concur with the upshot of that thinking, the sense of disconnection and alienation that comes out of that fixed, narrow identity, and the assessment of experience in terms of the narrow self-interest. So let me talk about this sense of connection. So I'll finish off this description of the ailment, the disease, in terms of the threefold alienation. And as I say, the Druidry would very much concur with this aspect of the explanation. So the alienation is from each other. We are inevitably alienated from each other in terms of, when we're in competition with other separate selves. It's the logic, if I'm a separate self, you're a separate self, and our interests clash. If we have the same needs and wants, it's almost inevitable that they will clash. And alas, aggression is often the outcome, which we're seeing play out tragically at this very moment. So from each other, alienation from each other, that would be one of the threefold alienations. The second would be alienation from nature. The third would be alienation from our bodies. And as I'll be explaining a bit later, they're actually not different. Alienation from nature and alienation from our bodies. I'll explain a bit more. So alienation from nature, it goes almost without saying, doesn't it? Our awareness of environmental issues highlights the fact that we act as if we are separate from the ecosystems that surround us and on which we depend. And we regard ourselves as separate from all the other species. We regard ourselves as superior, the only rational beings on this planet. And where is this taking us? Well, sadly, tragically, species extinction. And this leads, this sense of separation from ecosystems leads to a utilitarian relationship. We see the earth as simply, this is oversimplifying, the earth is reduced to a source of raw materials and a sink for our wastes. And that leads inevitably to environmental destruction, undermining, whereby we undermine our own life support systems. For example, trees, trees that absorb water, that clean the air, that capture carbon, we fell unsustainably. Now, this it's probably true. I think my experience would say that this sense of being separate from the ecosystems that surround me is exacerbated by urban living. That separation. The fact that I can go down to Sainsbury's and take a sandwich off the shelf without ever knowing where the ingredients came from means that I'm pretty separate from the sources of my nourishment, my food. So there's some inevitability of this sense of separation from ecosystems through urban living. We can obviously counter that. We can work on that, can't we? Okay, alienation, that was alienation from nature. What about alienation from our bodies? Well, I think we've all perhaps gone through this a bit during lockdowns. We live partly disembodied lives, again, it's part of our modern urban predicament. We inhabit virtual worlds. Our experience is mediated by electronic media and to some extent our social interactions, all the more so, obviously, since lockdown, sadly. For all the benefits, I am very grateful for digital media. But I do realize that it exacerbates my dwelling in my head. In our society, we privilege, as a background, part of our culture, we privilege our intellects, don't we? The faculty of the intellect over the, say, sense experience, intuition, feeling. Our ability to solve problems is highly valued, and that inevitably leads to a relegation of our other faculties. So the image that comes to me is that we dwell in the palace of our heads, from which we hold sway over our mental kingdom. I think there's also a contribution to our disembodied lives, our lives, that the disembodiment is exacerbated by cultural / religious factors that perhaps cut us off from our primal energies. And primal energies around striving, whether it's around reproduction, our growth, our nourishment. And one of the upshots of this is body shame. I think body shame is endemic in Western society, that manifests as lack of self-esteem, particularly with regard to the body. There is a fairly strong cultural religious message that in some quarters that our bodies are kind of embarrassing or even dirty, and should be hidden, need to be hidden. And some of this, of course, is probably subliminal rather than overt, maybe communicated through advertising, where we're constantly bombarded by idealized body images, and we perhaps internalize those, and they're impossible to live up to, and we end up with distorted body images. So this alienation from our body can express itself as neurotic inhibition, neglect of our bodies, self-harm, even anorexia. Yeah. Okay, well, that is a short description of the ailment. I think it's time now. Let's have a break for 10 minutes, and I invite Tim to split us up into groups. Maybe just 2 groups would be fine, and we'll just share any experiences that we've had of healing, the healing power of nature. Sometimes even just talking about our experiences, our positive experiences of nature, in the face of these possible alienations that I've been describing, can have a healing effect in itself. So Justin was just asking if there might be some time for a question at the end. So I'll try and finish in good time to leave room for discussion, sharing, or question at the end. So let me progress on to what I see as, if you like, what I'm offering as the antidote to what I've been describing there as the fundamental malaise that is the deluded sense of self. I suppose it's going to be obvious that the fundamentally that the antidote is a deconstruction of that false sense of self that comes with the sense of self separation, and that would be the prescription that Buddhism gives. So, that makes sense, doesn't it? But let me flesh that out in terms of immersion in nature. What role can immersion in nature play in deconstructing that sense of self, that fixed sense of self, separate sense of self? So it's kind of a negative way of putting it, deconstruction of the sense of self. Let's put it in more positive terms as development of a sense of connection to counterbalance the sense of self, or to change the sense of self. So I'm talking about developing a sense of connection with each other, with ourselves, our bodies, and with the world. And a great place to start, I would say, is developing connection with nature, particularly an emotional connection with nature. And how do we go about doing this? Through contact, intimate contact, immersion in nature. But it's not just any old immersion. How we immerse, the attitude that we adopt when we're immersing in nature is all important. You know, farmers are generally immersed in nature, but alas, they don't necessarily treat nature very well. But certainly the agricultural industry is one of the biggest polluters of water in this country. But, you know, having said that, I'm not blaming all farmers. You know, there are many very environmentally minded farmers out there, and praise to them. You know, long may they do their good work. And thank you, farmers, for all the food you supply. So, but yeah, so I'm talking about an appreciative, an attitude towards nature when we immerse ourselves. And I'm saying that what we need to characterize our attitude is an appreciative awareness. So to really behold the beauty that can be found there generally in nature. Most people can connect with a sense of beauty in nature. Not everyone, but most people can. And by appreciating that beauty, we can come to a sense of how nature is valuable in itself, and not simply through the services it provides us, not that it has its own intrinsic value. And this, of course, is an antidote to the utilitarian attitude. So in immersing ourselves in nature, we can discover potentially what I think is an innate quality that we have, which is an affinity with life, the affinity of life for life. So we recognize something in life, something in common. And out of that affinity comes a natural sense of solidarity. Now, maybe these kind of words, these terms, affinity, solidarity, don't quite hit the mark for you. I could say, you know, dare to love the earth. And let me give you a quote from Walt Whitman in this regard. He says, this is from A Song of Myself, Walt Whitman. Smile, O voluptuous, cool, breathed earth. Earth of the slumbering and liquid trees, earth of departed sunset, earth of the mountainous misty top, earth of the vitreous pour of the full moon just tinged with blue, earth of shine and dark mottling the tide of the river, earth of the limpid grey of clouds brighter and clearer for my sake, far swooping, elbowed earth, rich apple blossomed earth, smile, for your lover comes. So in our immersion in nature, it's an opportunity to open our hearts, potentially, and experience joy in that setting. On this topic of emotional connection with nature, I was at a talk given by the environmentalist Charles Eisenstein about 3 years ago, and he was asking the question: why is it that certainly at that point we weren't winning the argument in practical terms for climate change? And he was asking the question: well, you know, we've got all the data, we could see the ice sheets melting, we can measure the temperature rises. Why is that data not sufficient? And he was saying the argument was, the problem was with the argument, with the narrative of the argument. He was saying it was too based on rational self-interest. It was about addressing people's fear as regards the future, their survival. And he was making the point that that's just not enough to convince people, to really get them behind your cause. He popped the question, why do we look after our children? Is it out of fear that the social worker is going to come knocking on the door? Or is it out of love? So, his message was very clear. The underlying problem with our championing of nature is that we're not sufficiently emotionally connected to the natural world. We don't have that kind of gut connection that what we do to the planet, we do to ourselves. And the result is a half-hearted response to environmental issues. Okay, so that's, I'm suggesting, where we start in terms of immersing in nature, to tap into the healing power of nature, connecting, developing an emotional connection with nature. So the second area for developing a sense of connection is connection with our bodies. And these kind of flow very naturally from what I was describing earlier as the nature of the ailment. So alienation from our bodies was an ailment, connection with our bodies, cultivating a connection with our bodies, an appreciation of our bodies is part of the remedy. And I'll start by saying that it's, as far as I'm concerned, axiomatic that our bodies are not different from nature. We are nature. You could look at it from a rational point of view. You can see the body as an ecosystem, a biodiverse ecosystem. We are, from one point of view, a human bacterial viral hybrid. We are a collaborative system that has co-evolved over our complete history of evolution. We are in symbiotic relationship, mutually beneficial relationship with various agents, bacterial and viral. And these are our partners. For example, against infection, there's an example would be lactobacillus, a bacteria. To help us in our digestion, we have about 1.5 kilos of bacteria in the small and large intestine to help us with our digestion, numbering about 500 to 1,000 different species. We have bacteria that metabolize fats and sugars, that make enzymes. And on our skin, the largest organ of our body, we have, it is estimated, about a trillion bacteria that help with moisturizing and fight infection. So we are this walking, talking ecosystem. We are nature. Our bodies are nature. And in a sense, immersing in nature is an opportunity to experience our body at home. It's an invitation to dwell in the senses. So the senses, hearing the birdsong that we were listening to earlier, even if it was canned, to see the bluebells, which I hope you've been out to see this spring, maybe smell the wood smoke if you happen to be cooking on open fires, feel the sun, the rain on your skin. The fact is, in nature, certainly for me, the senses, my senses have just more pleasant experiences compared with urban life and its traffic noise and fumes. So I'm more open, just naturally more open. My senses are more open. And this, for me, is a joyful experience. I feel more alive. It feels like I'm living life more to the full. And this is a cause, I would say, of exuberance for me. So one way I have of accentuating that is I often, if I'm by myself in nature, like I was for 2 weeks in a field and at the foot of Glastonbury tour up to last week, I go naked. So that heightens my sense experience. Again, the skin is the largest organ, sense organ of the body, and clothes are simply a barrier to sensation. So, I just love the warmth of the sun, the coolness of the breeze, the warmth of a fire if I'm lighting a fire, the coolness of rain, or even it's 3-4 degrees with a northeast wind. Even that can be just it makes me feel really alive. And I have a sense of connecting with nature through that. The experience of my body seamlessly part of nature. Just fewer barriers between me and nature. The sense of separation feels suspended. That I appreciate more the sense that I'm not separate from the elements. That sense of separation is, as I was referring to earlier, it's kind of a language problem. It's not that here's me and there's nature. I am nature. We are the elements. We are the elements aware of themselves. And also there is some sense in which, those I described earlier, I was a Catholic for a fair period of my life. And I would say that when I'm naked in nature, there's some reconciling goes on with my, if you like, primal drives, primal energies. Some reconciliation goes on. To the experience of these energies as kind of integral to my nature, that the energies of nature are my energies. So let me quote a couple of verses from a Dylan Thomas poem, the force that through the green fuse drives a flower. I think he expresses this experience that I enjoy every now and again very beautifully. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age. That blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer. And I am dumb to tell the crooked rose my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that dries the mouthing streams turns mine to wax, and I am dumb to mouth unto my veins how at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. Okay, so coming back to what I'm talking about now is developing a sense of connection with our bodies. One method we can use to do that, but it's whether we're in nature or not, but in a sense, we're always in nature. Our bodies are always available to us. They're always there, whether we're in a city or in the country, in a natural setting, our bodies are always there. And we can engage in the practice of mindfulness. Of course, this is from the Buddhist context or tradition. You'll all have heard of mindfulness. It's a household term now. One definition of it from Jon Kabat-Zinn is, paraphrasing, a deliberate attention to the present moment. A deliberate attention to present moment experience with an attitude of kindness and curiosity. So really being present with whatever is going on, whether it's joy, whether it's pain, whether it's pleasure. As opposed to being distracted from our experience. And we're all very good, I imagine, at distracting ourselves. T.S. Eliot in Four Courts describes our predicament very beautifully when he says, distracted, we are often, almost our modern condition is, we are distracted from distraction by distraction. But our bodies can be an anchor to help us counter that distraction, that tendency, that push towards distraction from our sensation, from our feelings, from our experience. The body is always there to come back to. The sensations of the breathing, as long as we're alive, the sensations of the breath are always there to return to. In the midst of the swirling mind, swirling thoughts and emotion, we can always anchor our awareness in the breath, in the sensations of the breath. And with practice, this simple technique can help us to be present and aware without identifying with our experience. So one way of putting it is looking at our thoughts rather than through our thoughts. So we're not so identified with our views or our angle on the world, our thoughts, but we're able to be aware, yeah, that's how I'm thinking. And this results in a spaciousness, a kind of a certain distance, but an engaged distance that allows us, rather than being up like that with our experience, to having a bit of context and perspective on our experience. It's like having a wide-angled lens where there's a depth of field, so we can see the pleasant and the unpleasant at the same time and hold them all together. And this,
Ratnadeva, just to say, I'm just aware that we're just reaching our 8 o'clock. I mean, I'm happy for us to continue, but just please.
I thought we were going until 8:15.
Well, 8 to 8:15. So yes, but please, if people have some other place to go, please feel free to leave. But we will carry on. Please carry on, Randy.
Well, I do apologize, but my understanding was that we were going until 8:15. Anyway, shall I just? I mean, I can go on on my thread of thinking, or I can open up to questions. I've got a bit more to say. I'm kind of building up to how the different factors that we have available to us to experience the nature cure can come together when we are mindful in nature. Shall I go on, or okay? I'll proceed on that very theme. That, in a sense, what I've been describing are transformative, potentially ingredients that we can bring all together in what I describe as a cauldron of healing. So I don't know if you're familiar with one of the most famous Druids of all is, I've got an image of him here, and he was famous for having his cauldron. So Getafix, don't know if you're familiar with this character. So you can imagine he's got all these ingredients of immersion in nature, appreciation of the beauty of nature, emotional connection, open heart with nature, a connection with the body and abiding in the senses, and mindfulness. We can bring them all together in this cauldron, which, if you like, is mindfulness in a natural setting. So I'm coming to a point where I'm saying that mindfulness is in a natural setting is, for me, the situation par excellence for nature cure. And I was describing my 2 weeks away at the foot of Glastonbury tour. For me, that is a very much an opportunity to experience these different aspects of countering the alienations that I've been describing. And you know, I don't think it's any coincidence that nature retreats are there in various religious traditions. You know, Jesus went to the desert, didn't he, for 40 days and 40 nights after his baptism. Muhammad went to his cave at Hira near Mecca, where he was visited by the Archangel Gabriel, and that was the beginnings of the Quran. So the thing is, mindfulness in a natural setting allows us to enter into stillness in nature, to stop. However busy our lives are, we can just stop with our senses fully awake, with our heart open. And for me, this is an ideal context for insight, for seeing a bit more deeply into how things are, because it provides conditions for a visceral experience of connection with nature. And what happens with that visceral experience of connection with nature is a dropping away of that distinction, a fading of the distinction between self and other, a sense that the sense of self attenuates. Maybe another way of expressing this is the sense of self expands beyond the limits of this container, this body of skin. A quote from Thomas Traherne: You never enjoy the world aright till the sea itself flows in your veins, till you are clothed in the heavens and crowned with the stars. So I think he really captures that sense of our sense of self expanding out to include the world around us. So it's an inclusive sense of expanded self, that a sense that the world is not a collection of separate things, separate from me, but rather a confluence of natural processes. And I'm one of I'm an eddy in this flux of natural processes. Maybe a small eddy, but I'm there, I'm distinct, but I'm part of this whole, this bigger whole, and constantly moving. So this visceral sense of our experience of connection, for me, gives a profound experience of non-separation. Well, sometimes profound, sometimes just a wee glimmer of experience of non-separation, which can be the basis for a sense of kinship with nature, a sense of kinship with all the beings that surround me, whether it's the grass and the birds. And this can lead to a radical insight, which I think is a radical insight, that what we do to ourselves, we do to others. What we do to nature, we do to ourselves. What we do to others, we do to ourselves. So this insight, I think, if we really let that sink in, I think is quite healing in itself. But it's also, this sense of kinship with all beings is also potentially the beginning of a virtuous, what I would describe as a virtuous circle of healing. If you like, a cascade effect of healing. Because the sense of kinship with beings can be the basis for love and compassion. And love, surely, is the greatest healing power of all. Addresses all separation. To quote Eric Fromm from his book, The Art of Loving, a lovely little volume, he says, love is the only answer to the problem of human existence. And the reason he says that is the basic problem is separation. He identifies that the basic wound that we all experience is separation, and love addresses that source, the source of wounding, separation. It bridges any gap, and it reinforces or underwrites our sense of connection. So to give you the second half of that Einstein quote I gave you earlier, where he was talking about the optical delusion of our consciousness, that means that we are separate. We are separate, and that separation feels like it's a prison. So he says, the second half of that quote was, our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. And that all flows from this enhanced sense of kinship with all beings. So just to finish off, where is this most fully or potentially most fully expressed? And I would say in community. But both, by now you'll have got the picture that I don't mean just human, I mean both human and non-human community. So as social beings, far more effective strategies in terms of how we function, rather than competition, is cooperation, is empathy, is generosity. Generosity being one of the most fundamental virtues in the Buddhist tradition. And generosity is about attending to the needs of our kin, kin in the broadest sense. It is a practical expression, an expression in action of non-separation, because it lifts us, and it lifts us out of our narrow self-view. It reinforces our sense of connection. So love, generosity, community, these all reinforce our sense of connection. And it redounds to our own benefit, our own happiness. I'll finish with this quote from the Shantideva, I think he was 8th century Buddhist writer, Indian. All those who suffer in the world do so because of their desire for their own happiness. All those happy in the world are so because of their desire for the happiness of others. And I'll end there with Shantideva. So we've got 4 minutes. I'm sorry, it's only 4 minutes. But if anybody has a question, let's do an express job on it in 4 minutes. Tim, sorry, Justin, you mentioned you had a question.
Do you have a question, Tim?
No, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I remember my dad telling me as a child about the Druids going up on Primrose Hill, and now I live even closer to Primrose Hill. I'm just curious to know, do the Druids still go up on Primrose Hill, and are we allowed to sort of, how close are you allowed to sort of go to their ceremony when if you're not a Druid yourself?
Maybe Alice could answer, because I saw her nodding. Maybe Alice has witnessed this.
No, I've never been up, but I know that they come for things like solstice and equinoxes and so on, either in larger groups or smaller ones. But they tend to go before I get up. Because
what time does it?
A dawn experience. So it's quite early usually.
So they go for every equinox and solstice.
Yeah, they certainly come for the solstice. But it was my understanding that certainly some of them come for the equinoxes as well. But,
and do you have to sort of keep
maybe Ratnadeva knows more?
No. My sense is that I don't know any Druids who don't like an audience. That's one thing.
As far as I know, they're quite welcoming.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and if they're in a public space, I'd say, you know, it goes with the turf, doesn't it? Having non spectators or audience or participants who just want to join in at whatever level. I would say anyone my sense is anyone would be welcome. I hope to make it there one day. I'm going to keep my eyes open.
But I do have a question, if I may ask.
Yeah, sure.
And it's coming back to that Getafix as a village druid. You know, he was brewing something, and can you maybe tell me more about where druids were ancient psychonauts? Were they using some plant medicine? Is this known, or do you have any facts for that? Thank you. And thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, by the way.
A real pleasure, Peter. I would be surprised if if druids, both ancient and modern, don't use psychoactive substances in order to achieve altered mental states. I don't use them myself, and the camps that I've been on, they were banned. You know, because out of respect for some of the people attending those camps would have been, you know, had previous histories, difficult histories around addiction. So out of respect for them, the general rules on any of the camps that I've been in was no drugs, no alcohol. But yes, it's an interesting question. I think you know, it is a partly shamanic tradition is Druidry. It's certainly animistic, and I think animism and shamanism are very interrelated. And many shamanic traditions do use psychoactive substances, don't they, in achieving altered states of consciousness.
Thank you so very much.
Yes, Alice.
Yeah, I was sorry, I was just going to say that I put up a link in the chat to the Loose Association of Druids of Primrose Hill, who say that they give details on their Facebook page about the 8 festivals that they celebrate on Primrose Hill, and they tell you where they go and what they do and so on. So apparently these are the 8 rituals of the Ogdoadal cycle throughout the Celtic year.
Thanks for that.
On a Sunday. So it's usually on the Sunday nearest the appropriate day in all weathers.
Oh, so it's not necessarily the actual solstice or equinox or whatever.
No, I think it's they probably it's probably easier on a Sunday if people are working.
Practical, if not, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, anyway,
No, they've been infiltrated by the Christian Church again, and they've told them it's the Sabbath. Haven't they learned anything yet? Come on, all those thousands of years of persecution.
So they seem to be very welcoming on their Facebook page. So if you wanted to join them, you just have a look at their Facebook page and see what they're saying about what's coming up.
I think there was a couple more Druid links actually on the page that we had up for Ratnadeva on our website. It's got a few more links to some local Druidry. All right, my friends. Well, that was a blast. Thank you so much.
A pleasure indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I love the metaphysics, but I also love the poetry. I thought that they work very, very nicely together. Well, and the images as well. Great. Well, I mean, you can probably see Ratnadeva is also our haggis bearer on our Burns night. So, you can see him in his I think up to now he's always appeared clothed. But, from what he said this evening, we don't know what might happen next.
It is a bit cold on Burns night.
Yeah, it is a bit chilly, but there you go. Yes, thank you very much for that. And so one more event in our season tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Myself and James Shaw talking about our mammalian neurobiology. So why in many ways we are still animals, and that affects how we experience the world and also how we exist in community. All right, folks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.